get along with the Russian people very, very well.
The Iron Curtain has descended across the country.
And resolute action.
I shall go to Korea.
I am not, and never have been, a member of the Communist Party.
That we shall pay any price, bear any burden, support any friend, oppose any foe.
No, we won't go.
We believe that peace is at hand.
Will be regarded as an assault on the vital interests of the United States.
We understand each other better, and that's a key to peace.
Dispatches from the Cold War. Dateline 1961, Berlin. It had become an exodus of alarming proportions. They poured over the border that spring in increasing numbers week by week. Their reasons for leaving were varied. Rising workloads exhausted them. Erratic food supplies frustrated them. Travel restrictions isolated them. They were the refugees passing from East Germany to the West, through the last open lifeline, the divided capital, Berlin. World War II had left many divisions throughout Europe. In Winston Churchill's words, an iron curtain had descended, stretching across the continent from the Baltic to the Black Sea. Berlin was the last gap in that curtain, the Achilles heel of Eastern Europe. 110 miles inside East Germany, Berlin was occupied by the Russians in the east, the Americans, French, and British in the west. Berlin's open border wound through the middle of the city, in some places down the middle of the street, or along one of Berlin's many canals. Refugees who could reach that border could cross easily into West Berlin. Some were arrested or turned back, but many got through. And from West Berlin, access was guaranteed to West Germany, by car, by train, or on one of many daily airline flights. The relative ease of the passage had lured nearly 1/6 of the East German population to vote with their feet in the 12 years since the end of the Berlin blockade. Their migration had proven to be an intolerable drain on the sluggish economy that the East could not afford. Berlin had become, as Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev put it, a bone in the throat, a forward bastion of the West aggressively maintained inside East Germany. It had been a contentious spring in the Cold War. After the American embarrassment with the ill-fated invasion of Cuba at the Bay of Pigs, the Soviets seemed to be flexing their muscles. Khrushchev was determined to resolve the Berlin issue. June 2nd, Kennedy and Khrushchev came face to face for the first time in a summit meeting held in a neutral location, Vienna. Dean Rusk was Kennedy's Secretary of State.
At that meeting, Chairman Khrushchev, in a very harsh and almost brutal fashion, tried to intimidate the new young president of the United States with an ultimatum on Berlin. He said that in a certain number of months, we're going to make an agreement with the East Germans that the access rights will be a matter for the East Germans, that if you in the West try to interfere with these East German decisions, there will be war. And at one point, Mr. Kennedy had to look him straight in the eye and say, well then, Mr. Chairman, there will be war.
June 21st. Soviet television commemorated the 20th anniversary of the start of Hitler's blitzkrieg against the Russians. The massive display of Soviet military strength provided an appropriate context for Khrushchev's belligerent message. He blamed the West for the post-war ills of Europe and insisted that world peace would be threatened if the conflict over Berlin was not settled. Khrushchev's bluster was especially convincing to television audiences in East Germany, where even reluctant holdouts began packing their bags. By the end of June, the flood of refugees had climbed to over 4,000 a week. On July 25th, President Kennedy warned Americans about the severity of the crisis.
The NATO shield was long ago extended to cover West Berlin, and we have given our word that an attack upon that city will be regarded as an attack upon us all.
President Kennedy quickly translated those fighting words into action. In early August, he requested and received a huge increase in the military budget and alerted troops already training in West Germany to prepare for what he said might become a collision of major proportions between the Soviet Union and the United States in Berlin. As the tension increased, so did the flood of refugees. Walt Rostow was one of the president's close advisors.
People just began to pour out of East Germany through East Berlin to West Berlin, and it was a flow of the ablest people and technicians and all the rest of it. It couldn't go on, and Kennedy thought it through, and he suddenly said, you know, East Germany is bleeding to death, and Khrushchev can't afford that. He's going to have to do something, possibly a wall.
On Saturday, August 12th, a record 3,300 refugees registered with the West Berlin authorities at the Marienfeld Refugee Center. Newsman Daniel Shore was there covering the story.
I spent all day with camera crew at Marienfelde that day, interviewing the refugees, all of whom said they thought they might be the last people to leave. They seemed to know that something would happen within the next 24 hours.
Despite the panic building outside the city that evening, most Berliners enjoyed a normal summer Saturday night. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, East German border guard Rudi Thoreau was receiving the orders that the refugees had feared most.
At midnight, August 12th, we had a combat alert, and we were told that everything around West Berlin would be closed off, and we would finally put a stop to the headhunters who were enticing our citizens away to the west. For the first time, we were issued full combat ammunition and hand grenades. We were told that if there was a conflict, we would ride into battle on Russian tanks.
Suddenly, at 2 a.m., East German troops moved in to begin their work. Under the glare of enormous searchlights, they began planting posts and stringing wire. Daniel Shore witnessed the scene.
It's half light, and it's hard to discern what's happening. Strange feeling of, what do they got there? It looks like bales of barbed wire. And what are those funny concrete things that they've got? And why do they got those crowbars? They're digging up cobblestones. Why do they want to do that? And, you know, it is so strange that although we knew something was going to happen, we were so focused on it happening elsewhere than on the East-West Berlin border that it took some time, maybe because we hadn't had enough sleep anyway, to focus on the meaning of it. And then we began to grasp the full dimension of what was happening. They were going to take over and seal that border.
August 13th, 1961, Berlin. As dawn broke over the beleaguered city, it was suddenly clear that the nightmare had begun. The East German army was severing Berlin in two. Cameraman Peter Diemel was filming in Potsdamer Plaza.
They were stringing their barbed wire, and we were very close to them. Could touch them, and we even spoke. And they were making jokes. I said, well, what's this? And they said, oh, well, we are just doing this so you can't go over our green here, something like that. It was just a very, very relaxed thing. But a few hours later, it became very, very tense.
Angry crowds began to gather on the western edge of the border, taunting and threatening the East German soldiers. On both sides, Berliners watched the barrier rising between them and mourned the separation from friends and family. An East German soldier dared to part the barbed wire to let a small boy pass and was arrested, as were so many others that morning. East German soldiers responded to angry crowds with water cannons and tear gas. As the demonstrations grew more violent, the West German police were called out to prevent a major battle between civilians and the East German army. The response many awaited seemed painfully slow in coming.
The West German people have expressed disappointment that the Allies have not taken a firmer stand against the closing, and more than 250,000 assembled before the Berlin City Hall to hear Mayor Willy Brandt rally them to stand firm against any further East German threat.
It was a tense situation. We didn't know what would happen, but we all thought we would have to fight because no one believed that the Western Allies would allow us to block off all of East Berlin.
As Berliners waited for action from the Allies, Washington was resolved to stand by a decision made weeks before. Nothing would be done to protect East Berlin or to ensure that the city remained one city. President Kennedy had guaranteed the freedom of West Berlin alone and would not react unless West Berlin was itself attacked.
If you know that at the end of the road, the West is not going to fight a war in order to knock the wall down in Berlin, then you better not start down that trail.
American Major General Albert Watson tried to organize a formal Allied protest, but was rebuffed.
After we received the message turning down our proposed protest, it became apparent to all of us that Washington wanted to play down the seriousness of this event. It was a political matter in their view, and they felt that we should not do anything that would exacerbate the situation.
President Kennedy's press secretary, Pierre Salinger, remembers how easily Khrushchev justified his position.
Khrushchev told me I had to build this wall. He said there was a hemorrhage. We were losing all the best people in East Germany. I couldn't let that go on. I had to stop those people from going to the West, and so I had to build that wall.
The West, in refusing to protest, had effectively written off East Berlin, and individuals were forced to take matters into their own hands. East Berlin steelworker Kurt Wiesmak lived a few miles from the border.
On Sunday morning at about 10, my wife woke me up when she heard on the radio that they were closing the boundary to West Berlin. It was clear to us that we had to use this night if we were going to get away at all.
Rudy Turo's force was instructed to prevent Wiesmak or any refugees from getting through.
I was the sergeant on duty at the Bernau railway station. Thousands of East German citizens were there trying to get to Berlin. The only ones we let through were those who had work permits or government passes. Those suspected of wanting to flee to the West were arrested or reported to the police.
Every place we tried was guarded. Finally, at about 1 in the morning, we arrived at the edge of this canal. We were very afraid because we knew that there were guards everywhere. But we didn't see any guards here, so we decided to swim. First, I helped my wife across, and then I went back to get our clothes. When I was swimming back to the west, my wife called to me, "Watch it, Kurt. Some of them are coming." I turned and saw 2 soldiers standing right where we had gotten in.
Wiesmak and his wife were among the few to make it through. The border closed tighter and tighter as days passed and the wall grew. Yet, as Peter Diemel remembers, the courage and persistence of the refugees seemed limitless.
We came here to film border guards setting up. Then we saw that over in East Berlin there were some young people. It looked like they wanted to come over. And after a few minutes went by, they really started to run. And one girl hit very hard with her face. She really hit the barbed wire and fall down, and blood was over her face. But she was saved by some West Berliners.
Crossing the border in downtown Berlin presented a different kind of challenge.
Bernau Straße was a normal street in West Berlin, but the East Berlin side, the front of the houses, was actually the border. So people living in the houses, in their houses, were in East Berlin. Looking out of the window, they had the head in West Berlin already.
And when you jump out of a window, as soon as you reach the sidewalk, you are in West Berlin. That became an intolerable situation for these German fopos, who after a while forced people to put barriers on their own windows to keep them from escaping.
In a dramatic rescue attempt, West Berliners tried to pull a woman free from an East German soldier. Finally, they succeeded. The soldier lost his grip, and the woman dropped to safety. Willy Fiender lived nearby on the 5th floor of number 7 Benauerstrasse.
I got a call at work one day, my wife telling me to come home. When I got there, she was already in the window. On the west side, the fire department came and opened up the fire net. They were yelling, "Jump, jump." And I told my wife to jump. She started to cry and wanted to come back inside. But the East German police were already banging on our door. I said, "There's no return now," and I ran to the window and tore her loose and gave her a push. Some East German soldiers shot at her while she was falling, but the West Berlin police fired some warning shots and they stopped. Next, I dropped my son, and then I climbed out. The soldiers threw tear gas at the firemen, and some of them let go of the fire net, so I hit the sidewalk and injured my spine. When they carried me to the ambulance, I asked where my wife was. No one knew.
Fiender's wife, though wounded in the fall, survived the East German bullets and was later safely reunited with her family. 2 American students traveling that summer in Germany tried to help a young East German woman escape in the trunk of their car. Victor Pankey remembers his ordeal.
We went out to a darkened street and an area that she felt was fairly safe, and she got in, and since she appeared to be relatively comfortable, why we decided that we would give it a try. And so from that point, why we went directly to the Checkpoint Charlie crossing. And then they immediately asked to see what's in the car. They asked us to open the hood. We opened the hood, and there she was.
Pankey and his friend were arrested, tried, and sentenced to 2 years in an East German jail. No one knows what became of the woman. August 18th, 1961, Berlin. 1 week after the wall was begun, Vice President Lyndon Johnson arrived in West Berlin to rally the spirits of Berliners with a message of support from the United States.
He addressed a message to the people of East Berlin, telling them that the days of tyranny are numbered. Cheers for the Vice President's statements were loud and prolonged. They were reassured that the United States was a friend that would stand true.
Johnson greeted American troops arriving to supplement the Allied military presence there. After the initially disappointing American response to the construction of the wall, Berliners warmly welcomed the reinforcements. At home, President Kennedy was calling up the reserves. More than 200,000 reservists were ordered to report for a year of active duty. Among them was Company B of the 101st Signal Battalion of Yonkers, New York.
You know, the Eisenhower years were over. I saw JFK coming in, new kid on the block in the international affairs, and he was being tested.
You know, where we were going and how long we were going to be away. So we got up there, and then we found out that we might be shipped overseas. We had the training, we had good officers that trained us well, and we were ready to go. And if we had to go fight, we'd go fight.
Well, we knew we were going. There was a mission for us, and our equipment was in Germany, and we had 8 weeks of what they called intensified training at that time to get them ready to go to Germany, and they were ready.
When the Soviets continued to restrict Western access to East Berlin, it looked as if there might be war. On October 27th, American tanks moved into place at the Friedrichstrasse checkpoint, known to them as Checkpoint Charlie. For 16 hours, American and Soviet tanks faced off. Yet their combative stands on the brink belied each other's unwillingness to take the fatal step toward war. The following morning, the tanks were withdrawn without firing a shot. Who's to say who had the last word? Perhaps President Kennedy, upon visiting the scene 2 years later to inspire Berliners with his proclamations of shared liberty. June 1963. 17-year-old Julian Hildebrandt witnessed the arrival of the American president.
He came right next to my house. He passed by. So I saw him there the first time, and it was kind of tears came into my eyes when I saw him first, this young president. See, in 61, there was built the Berlin Wall. And the only hope for the people from Berlin was America, was the Americans. They protected Berlin, and our big hope was that Kennedy, this young president, could do something for us.
The president stood looking at the wall dividing Germans, and while moved to make peace with the communists, he remained committed to the security and democracy of Western Europe.
There are many people in the world who really don't understand, or say they don't, what is the great issue between the free world and the communist world. Let them come to Berlin.
Kennedy's words offered an exhilarating declaration of solidarity with Berliners who had suffered a harshly enforced division. The climax of his speech owed a great deal to an interpreter named Bob Lochner.
President Kennedy said I should write out on a slip of paper in German, I am a Berliner. And then we first went to Willy Brandt's office while hundreds of thousands were roaring outside, and President Kennedy calmly rehearsed this brief phrase for a couple of minutes.
All free men, wherever they may live, are citizens of Berlin. And therefore, as a free man, I take pride in the words, Ich bin ein Berliner.
When he said, Ich bin ein Berliner, the Berliners were happy that the president showed a sign that I am with you. And whatever happens here, and if the Russians are going to go on more confrontation, we are here, the United States is here, and we are helping you.
In what was to be his last visit to Berlin, Kennedy left an indelible impression on the people of that city. More than 70 people had died trying to escape over the Berlin Wall. And the wall still stands, an open chapter from the chronicles of the eagle and the bear.
Crocker's plan. Central Pacific won their bet. Now only a few miles away. 1869. The West gathered to celebrate the laying and the driving of the last. Governor Stanford and Vice President of the Union Pacific, the final link. But the spike was relayed to the country. D-O-E. Judah's dream railroad had become a new era for California, and people began to move freely from business and agriculture flourished with the railroad as a base. Empire that controlled California.